Today in our Zoom meeting, we went over comprehension strategies that your child should be practicing while they're reading their stories for you. This goes for the reading A to Z stories, but also library books that they check out or any kind of reading book that you have at home that they're reading to make sure that they are practicing comprehension, because it's just as important as reading the words. So the very first strategy we went over today was predicting Panda. And predicting Panda says to look at the text and think about what will happen next. And so we talked about some examples of this, but the best time to predict is before you even open up the cover. And then the second best time to predict would be within the text, usually about halfway through the book. If there's some problem or something that's going to happen, it's always good to stop and reflect and ask your kids to predict what do they think is going to happen next, or how do they think that the story is going to end. Okay, the second strategy we went over today is picturing Peacock. And so picturing Peacock thinks you will find that you can picture the story in your own mind. And so when we use picturing Peacock, we are actually using all of our senses. And so you want your kids to create a visual in their mind, picture it, what's happening in the story. Think about all of their senses. If they were there, what would they smell? What would they feel? What would they see? What would they smell and taste? If you can involve more senses, the more likelihood that they'll remember the story. And so picturing Peacock helps us to remember to always create a visual picture while we're reading. Okay, our next strategy we went over was text to tiger. And so he wants you to show what you read connects to what you know. And so we always make text connections three ways. We do text to text, text to self, and text to world. And so this is probably the one that the kids use the most because they get excited when they can relate to something in the story. And that's basically what this comp strategy is. When they are doing text to text, they are recalling another story that they read. And they can compare it to, it'll remind them of something that they've read. When they're doing text to self, it is something personal to them. When they read something, you can see little light bulbs go off, they get their spark of enthusiasm because they can connect to what they are reading in the text is something personal to them that they've experienced or that they can relate to. And then finally, a little bit harder for our little kiddos, but text to world so that they can make a connection from the story to something that they've seen out in the world or have experienced through a vacation or have even seen on television. And so keep making these text connections with your kids, because the more they make, the more likelihood that they'll be able to remember the information and their comprehension will be there. Okay. Our next strategy is a wandering walrus. We use this a lot in our writing, but also in our reading. When they, wandering walrus wants you to know you should always ask questions as you go. And so this again is something that I see the kids do when they're reading their A to Z books. If they are not sure about something, they are not afraid to ask. And these are the questions to keep in mind. They should be asking what, who, where, why, and when. Those are also the questions that they should be able to answer about every story that they've read. What was it about? Who were the characters? Where is the setting? When did this take place? And why? Something that happened in the story, why did it occur? These are also the words to keep in mind when your child is creating a piece of writing for you. All of these things should be able to be answered, whether it's their story that they wrote or whether it's a story that they are reading. Okay, and our next strategy we went over today is retelling Rhino. He wants you to know that you can tell what you read on your own. And so the kids remember this because they have done this in their writing and their reading. When they're using transition words like first, next, and last, they are actually retelling the story. And so they should be able to retell any fiction story that they read to you. They should be able to use the words what happened first, then what happened next, and then last, the conclusion of the story. They should also be able to use these words, transitional words, in their writing as well. Okay, and then we have two higher order thinking animals that help us remember these skills. This is synthesis sloth, and she wants you to turn something you read into something you learn. So the example is, if you've read that sloths move very slowly, well, then you can infer that a sloth would not win a race. And so synthesis sloth uses inference skills. They kind of go hand in hand, trying to be able to figure out, with the clues that the author gives you, the bigger picture of what's really going on. And then our final one is conclusion chameleon. And he knows when you read and think, you can conclude something unique. And so the little picture clue that we have for him is the chameleon's hungry and he sees a fly. And so the student thinks that he will probably want to eat the fly. So it's very similar to synthesis sloth and making inferences. They're using what they're told in the story, and then they're drawing conclusions about what they think is going to happen based on the information the author gives them. And so both of these last skills, synthesis sloth, conclusion chameleon, and making inferences, which we don't have a buddy for, all three of those are higher order thinking skills. And if your kids can give you answers that are tailored to these three strategies, they are doing excellent with their comprehension. All of the other strategies that we've used are basically knowledge-based. The retelling, the asking questions, making text connections, creating a picture in your mind, and then predicting. These are very knowledge-based and lower level comp skills. So if your child cannot do these, it is a good idea to practice a lot with these strategies when they're reading any stories to you, fiction or nonfiction. The synthesis, inferencing, and drawing conclusions are higher order thinking skills, and sometimes those come a little bit later when their development has moved along further. These are things that you should be doing with your kids in their writing and in their reading to prepare them for second grade. So I hope that this helped. Keep on reading, keep on asking questions to make sure that your kids are really understanding what they read so they will be ready for second grade. Thanks.